Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker. Thank you so much for joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And as always, we're glad to have the people that make the decisions that make everybody feel a whole lot better about where they are and where they live. Welcome back to the program, Archie Chaisson, Lafourche Parish president. How you doing, my friend?
What's going on, Keith? How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you. It's the beginning of June.
Yeah.
It's hurricane season, and man, we're all still kind of reeling from what Ida has done and the impact. But let's talk a little bit about that specifically for Lafourche.
Yeah, Keith, I keep saying we get a little bit better every day.
Right.
And I was down the bar this morning, had a meeting with a couple of business owners, and we'll still talk about that for a long time to come, because
Sure.
still a whole lot of work to do. People still repairing things and just now settling with their insurance companies and rebuilding and that sort of thing. Debris pickup continues, unfortunately, which is weird.
Right.
We're at probably about $27 million worth of debris we've picked up, little close to about 3 million cubic yards.
Wow.
So for comparison sakes, Katrina, which was kind of the worst storm that we had seen before this, we had about 250,000 yards of debris on the ground, right? It was paled in comparison to what we've seen here.
Right.
Housing continues to be a push. We see group sites coming up more and more. We push FEMA to put them on people's properties to get them closest to home. And now we're finally touching the people who are either renters or, as people are starting to settle with insurances and gutting their homes, they're realizing they can't live in it.
Right.
So that FEMA housing number continues to grow because now we're having to put people in some sort of temporary housing. So overall, we're doing really well. It's great to see graduations happening in Lafourche over the course of last week. Central's was last night. I think South Lafourche's is next week.
Right.
And ED White's was about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So it's good to see those positive things happen again in our community as we kind of reel out from Hurricane Ida and then reel back into this hurricane season.
Yeah. And so those positives really matter. People walking across a stage, right? And so just really exciting for those seniors who've had a tough time.
Yeah.
All they've known is COVID, their high school career, if you will, in Ida.
Yeah, I was watching the playback with I think you or Chris Arnold from Central Lafourche.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how this senior class hadn't had a normal school year since their freshman year or their 10th grade year. And it's weird to think about that we've been interrupted so many times by so many things, but that they're on the bigger and better things now going on in college or the workforce. So it's good to see him walk across that stage.
Well, and the other good thing about that interview, you saw the passion that he had for the people he cared for.
Yeah.
It was just really cool.
Yeah.
It's much like what you have down in all of Lafourche. And so we're thankful for that. Let's talk a little bit about our preparation for this year and maybe what we learned last year, some tough lessons, but what we learned moving forward.
Yeah, we had our big hurricane agency meeting last week. We brought in everybody, filled up our council chambers, from the water districts to the hospitals to the port commission to the sheriff's office, our PDs. And Ida really did open up some holes for us, right? It was kind of the perfect storm. Never would have thought we'd have had no power for that long a period of time, almost a month. In a lot of cases, no water for several weeks in a vast majority of Lafourche. So we've done some things different within government. You're going to see us procure some additional contracts for things that we think we might need in the future, whether it be water tankers, more generators, stuff like that. We're really having to change up our shelter operations, because now instead of about 1,700 people that we think we would have to evacuate, we're now looking at over 4,000. These people who are in these travel trailers, in these FEMA mobile homes, now have to evacuate for any named storm, even if it's a tropical storm, because these things aren't rated for those sorts of events anymore. Even some severe weather. You saw Terrebonne and Lafourche kind of open up some shelters for those severe weather systems we saw in April. So those things have to take place. We have to look at, with us and Terrebonne being combined, all of the southern parishes really go to all of the same places in the North Louisiana spots.
Right.
So how do we do that? How do we erect some temporary tents in parking lots? Do we look at bringing people out of state in some cases if we have to? So now's the time to really get that game plan together. Think about what you're going to do, whether you're in your house, whether you're in a travel trailer or a FEMA mobile home. Get that game plan. Make sure you have the food, the water, the medicine. What are you doing with your pet? What are you doing with a loved one who may be in a nursing home who may have to evacuate, that sort of thing. But then also what we're starting to tell people is think about what's going to happen when you come back this time. Think about whether that travel trailer will still be upright, whether that FEMA mobile home will still be upright.
Right.
And then what are you going to do if you can't live in that? How fast is it going to take FEMA or the state to get another unit in here to get you back into a place to live, sort of thing? So those dynamics are changing as well. How do we evacuate people? How quick do we pull those point-to-point agreements to get people out of here? Using our high schools as shelters, because some of the other buildings we won't have enough capacity in that we would historically have used.
Right.
So those sorts of things are really weird for us.
Right. And which schools we can use,
That's
right? Which buildings can we use that don't exist anymore or have still had too much damage, those kinds of things. And then for people with electricity issues and oxygen.
Yep.
It's one of the things that David Naka and I talked a little bit about.
Yeah.
That's something we learned about making sure that people have enough oxygen and being able to take care of that.
Yeah, and the other big thing is generator safety for us. Not only in the standby units, right? We had a huge amount of carbon monoxide calls after Hurricane Ida, because the minimum code requirements say these standbys have to be 5 foot away from the edge of your house. Well, those things are meant to run for a couple hours at a night when somebody clips a telephone pole. They're not meant to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with a load on it for a month, right? So we saw a huge amount of carbon monoxide complaints. So make sure you have those carbon monoxide detectors in your house. If you're using not a standby generator, just a portable one, make sure it's well ventilated. Make sure you're letting it cool for about 20 minutes before you try to refuel it, things like that, to help starve off some of those issues. But then have a backup plan for that, because what we saw in some cases after Hurricane Ida was a tree uprooted a natural gas line and you didn't have the natural gas supply to run your generator. Make sure you have enough oil filters and parts for in case that thing goes down in the middle of the night. How are you going to get it back up and running? Especially in those medical need or special needs scenarios. The average Joe like me can survive for a couple of days with no AC and no lights. But if you have those special needs, now's the time to really, and we always focus on get that game plan together now before we get into the height of hurricane season. Look, there's already something brewing down there in the Bay of Campeche now. We're gonna have these scenarios where we're gonna run through this stuff again this year. Hopefully not as severe as Hurricane Ida, but we're gonna have to run through some of these drills. So now's the time to really have that game plan in place.
Yeah, and knowing what to do with a trailer, even if it's strapped down. When you say evacuate, evacuate.
No doubt.
And we need to do that. Archie, always appreciate your time, my friend. Thank you so much. All right, that is Archie Chaisson with Lafourche Parish President. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us here on Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming here on HTV.